It was Tuesday afternoon, February 14th, 1978. The kind of gray, unremarkable day that blends into all the others. The kind of day where nothing extraordinary ever happens. Except today was different. The diner was nearly empty. Just the usual sounds drifting through the air, coffee brewing in the back, the rhythmic clink of plates being stacked, the low murmur of quiet conversation from a couple in the corner booth. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting their pale glow across the worn linoleum floor. Outside, cars passed slowly on the rain-slicked street. Inside, time seemed to move even slower. Then the door opened, and Muhammad Ali walked in. No fanfare. No cameras. No crowd of admirers trailing behind him. Just Ali, moving through the doorway like he belonged there, dressed simply in a dark jacket and slacks, his presence somehow filling the entire room without him saying a single word. A few heads turned. Someone whispered his name. But Ali just offered a gentle smile, nodded politely to no one in particular, and made his way toward a booth near the window. Behind the counter, a young waitress froze. Her name was Sarah. 24 years old. Blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. Tired eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. She stared at Ali for just a moment. Not because of who he was. Not because she was starstruck. But because she suddenly felt exposed. Her hands were shaking as she grabbed the coffee pot. She didn't know why. Maybe it was nerves. Maybe it was exhaustion from another sleepless night. Maybe it was the weight of everything she'd been carrying alone for so long. She approached his table slowly, carefully, like someone walking on ice. "Good afternoon, sir. Can I get you something to drink?" Her voice was steady, professional, practiced, but her hands weren't. As she poured water into his glass, Ali looked up at her. Really looked at her. Not the way most customers did, glancing, dismissing, moving on. He looked at her like he was actually seeing her. And that's when he noticed. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the pitcher down. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying recently. And when she reached across the table to place the menu in front of him, her sleeve rode up just an inch. Just enough. Ali saw the bruise. Dark purple. Fresh. Partially hidden beneath the fabric of her long-sleeved uniform, but unmistakable once you knew to look for it. His expression changed. Not with shock. Not with pity. With recognition. He didn't say a word. He just watched her. Studied the way she moved. The way she kept her head down. The way she pulled her sleeve back down the moment she realized it had shifted. Ali leaned back in his seat. Folded his hands on the table. And waited. Because Muhammad Ali had spent his entire life reading people. Reading opponents. Reading rooms. Reading pain that others tried to hide. And he knew. Sarah was in trouble. What happened next didn't just change her day. It changed her entire life. And when the manager finally saw what Ali left on that table 3 hours later, the whole restaurant went silent. This is the story of a tip no one saw coming. And a moment of courage that saved 2 lives. The kind of place you'd drive past without noticing. Faded red vinyl booths. Checkered floor tiles that had lost their shine decades ago. A jukebox in the corner that only played country and oldies. The smell of bacon grease and fresh coffee permanently baked into the walls. This was where everybody knew everybody. Where regulars had their seats and their orders memorized. Where the coffee was always hot and the pie was always homemade. Where working people came to fill their bellies before heading back to jobs that barely paid the bills. Sarah Mitchell was one of them. 24 years old. Single mother. She'd been working at this diner for nearly 2 years now. 6 days a week, double shifts when she could get them. Tips in her apron pocket. Dreams of going back to school someday tucked away even deeper. But life had other plans. That Tuesday started like any other. She clocked in at 11 a.m. sharp. Tied her apron around her waist with practiced efficiency. Exchanged a tired smile with Joe, the cook, through the kitchen window. Checked her section, tables 3 through 8. Poured herself half a cup of coffee and downed it standing up. Normal. Routine. Safe. But Sarah wasn't safe. She just didn't know anyone had noticed yet. The lunch rush had come and gone. The factory workers had finished their burgers and headed back to their shifts. The high school kids who'd skipped class had left their booth sticky with spilled soda. Now only a handful of people remained scattered throughout the diner. An elderly couple in the corner booth, sharing a piece of apple pie. An old man with a newspaper spread out in front of him, reading glasses perched on his nose. A trucker at the counter, scraping up the last of his mashed potatoes. The usual afternoon lull. Sarah moved between tables mechanically, refilling water glasses, clearing plates, offering refills on coffee with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Then the bell above the door chimed, and everything changed. Muhammad Ali stepped inside. No entourage, no bodyguards, no reporters with cameras and microphones. Just Ali, alone, moving through the room with a quiet confidence that made people instinctively straighten in their seats. The diner went silent for exactly 3 seconds. Heads turned. The old man's newspaper lowered slowly. The trucker's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Someone whispered, "Is that?" But Ali just smiled warmly, nodded to the room like he was greeting old friends, and slid into a booth near the window. Table 7, Sarah's section. Frank, the manager, a balding middle-aged man with a coffee-stained shirt and perpetual frown, nearly knocked over a stack of menus rushing out from the back office. "Sarah," he hissed, grabbing her elbow hard enough to leave fingerprints. His breath smelled like cigarettes and desperation. "That's Muhammad Ali. The Muhammad Ali. In my diner." Sarah nodded. She could see that. "Don't mess this up," Frank continued, his voice low and urgent. "Be professional. Smile. Make sure everything is perfect. You understand me? This could be huge for us." "I understand," Sarah said quietly. Frank released her arm, smoothed down his shirt, tried to look casual as he positioned himself behind the register where he could watch. Sarah took a deep breath. She'd served hundreds of people before. Thousands, probably. She could handle this. She grabbed a menu from the stack, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, walked across the diner floor on legs that suddenly felt unsteady. "Good afternoon, sir. Can I get you something to drink?" Ali looked up from the window. His eyes met hers, and something in his expression softened. "Sweet tea, if you got it." His voice was gentler than she expected. "Warm. Kind." "Yes, sir. Coming right up." Her voice stayed steady even as her hands began to shake. Her mind was racing even as her body went through the familiar motions. Grab a glass. Fill it with ice. Pour the sweet tea from the pitcher that had been brewing since morning. Add a lemon wedge. Place it on a small tray. Simple. Routine. But her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She gripped the edge of the counter, took a breath, tried to steady herself. This was just another customer. Just another table. It didn't matter who he was. Except it did matter. Because for some reason, having Muhammad Ali sitting in her section made her feel more exposed than she'd felt in months. She carried the tea back to his table, setting it down carefully in front of him. "Thank you," Ali said softly, his eyes lingering on her face for just a moment longer than necessary. And then his gaze dropped, just briefly, to her wrist. Sarah felt her stomach drop. She pulled her sleeve down instinctively, tugging at the fabric until it covered the bruise completely. The bruise that was supposed to be hidden. The bruise she'd covered with makeup that morning. The bruise that nobody was supposed to see. "What can I get you to eat?" she asked quickly, her voice a little too bright, a little too forced. Ali didn't answer right away. He just looked at her with those calm, knowing eyes. "You all right?" he asked quietly. The question hit her like a slap. "I'm fine," she said automatically. "Just a long shift. What would you like?" Ali nodded slowly, like he didn't quite believe her but wasn't going to push. "Not yet." "Surprise me," he said with a gentle smile. "Just nothing too heavy." Sarah nodded, scribbled something illegible on her notepad, and hurried back toward the kitchen before he could ask anything else. But the damage was done. He'd seen it. She knew he had. The night before had been bad. Worse than usual. Derek, her boyfriend of 3 years, had come home late. Again. She'd heard his truck pull into the driveway just after midnight, the engine rattling, the door slamming hard enough to wake Emma. Sarah had been in the kitchen, sitting at the table, staring at a stack of unpaid bills she couldn't afford to pay. "Where were you?" she'd asked when he walked in. Not accusatory. Just tired. Just wanting an answer. Derek's eyes had narrowed. She saw the anger flash across his face before he even opened his mouth. "You don't question me," he'd said, his voice low and dangerous as he crossed the small kitchen in 3 strides. Before she could react, his hand was around her wrist, squeezing hard enough to make her gasp. Hard enough to leave marks that would still be there days later. "You don't get to question me," he repeated, his face inches from hers. "You understand?" Sarah had nodded. She'd learned not to fight back. Not to argue. Not to cry where he could see. She'd learned that survival meant silence. He'd released her wrist and walked to the bedroom without another word, leaving her standing there in the dark, cradling her arm against her chest. She'd waited until she heard him snoring. Then she'd locked herself in the bathroom and cried as quietly as possible, running water so Emma wouldn't hear. Now, standing in this diner, serving Muhammad Ali, one of the most powerful, famous men in the world, Sarah felt the weight of her secret pressing down on her chest like a physical thing. She brought his food out 15 minutes later. Grilled chicken sandwich, fries, coleslaw. Simple. Safe. "Here you go, sir. Let me know if you need anything else." "Thank you, Sarah." She froze. He'd said her name. Of course, her name tag. He'd just read her name tag. That's all. But hearing him say it out loud felt different somehow. Personal. Like he actually saw her as a person and not just a waitress refilling his glass. "You're welcome," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned to leave, needing to put distance between herself and those perceptive eyes that seemed to see straight through every wall she'd built. But then Ollie spoke again. "Sarah." She stopped, turned slowly. "Yes, sir." Ollie gestured to the seat across from him. "You got a minute? Or is your boss gonna get mad?" Sarah glanced toward the back. Frank was on the phone in his office, gesturing wildly at whoever was on the other end. He wasn't paying attention. I have a minute," she heard herself say. And even though every instinct told her to run, to keep her distance, to protect her secrets, she sat down. Because something in Muhammad Ali's eyes told her that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry this alone anymore. He didn't rush. Didn't bombard her with questions. Didn't make her feel cornered or interrogated. He just waited. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was patient. Gentle. Like he had all the time in the world and nowhere else he needed to be. "You been working here long?" he finally asked, his voice conversational, easy. Sarah relaxed slightly. This she could handle. Small talk. Normal questions. "About 2 years. You like it?" She shrugged, fingers twisting the edge of her apron. "It's a job. Pays the bills. Mostly." Ollie nodded thoughtfully, like she'd said something profound instead of just stating a simple fact. "You got family?" he asked. "A daughter." Sarah's face softened for the first time since she'd sat down. "She's 5. Ali's entire expression lit up. "That's beautiful. What's her name?" "Emma." "Emma," Ollie repeated slowly, like he was committing it to memory, like it mattered. "She's lucky to have you." Sarah's throat tightened unexpectedly. She didn't feel lucky. She didn't feel like a good mother. Most days she felt like she was failing at everything. Working too much, spending too little time with Emma, staying in a situation that got worse every month because she didn't know how to leave. "Thank you," she whispered, blinking rapidly. Ollie leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table. His hands were massive, fighter's hands, scarred and powerful, but his movements were careful, deliberate, unthreatening. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I know we just met, and I don't mean to overstep, but I've been watching you since I walked in here, and I gotta ask you something. I need you to be honest with me." Sarah's heart started pounding. Her palms went clammy. She knew what was coming. Somehow, she knew. "Okay," she said carefully. Ollie held her gaze, his dark eyes steady and unwavering. "Are you safe?" 3 words. That's all it took to crack the armor she'd been wearing for months. Sarah opened her mouth. No sound came out. She closed it again. Looked down at her hands folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white. "I'm fine," she said automatically, the lie falling from her lips like it had 1,000 times before. Ollie didn't respond. He didn't argue. Didn't try to convince her she was wrong. He just sat there. Watching. Waiting. The silence stretched out between them like a bridge she was terrified to cross. Sarah felt the tears building behind her eyes. She blinked hard, trying to force them back, but one escaped anyway, sliding down her cheek before she could stop it. "I'm fine," she repeated, but her voice cracked on the last word, betraying her. Ollie reached across the table, slowly, telegraphing his movements so she could pull away if she wanted to, and placed his large hand gently over her trembling ones. His touch was warm. Steady. Safe. "Sarah," he said, his voice so soft she had to lean in to hear him. "I've been in a lot of fights. More than I can count. And I can tell when someone's been hurt. You don't have to tell me everything right now. You don't have to tell me anything at all if you're not ready. But I need you to know something." She looked up at him, tears streaming freely now. "You're not alone," Ollie said firmly. "Whatever you're going through, whatever you're afraid of, you're not alone anymore. You hear me?" A sob caught in Sarah's throat. She pulled her hands back quickly, wiping at her face with her sleeve, suddenly aware that they were sitting in the middle of the diner where anyone could see. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I shouldn't. I have to get back to work." "Don't apologize," Ollie said firmly, his voice carrying a quiet authority that made her freeze. "You got nothing to be sorry for. Not one thing." Sarah looked at him through blurred vision, this man she'd only met an hour ago, this stranger who somehow saw straight through to the truth she'd been hiding from everyone. "I really do have to get back," she whispered. Ollie nodded slowly. "Okay. But before you go, I want you to do something for me." "What?" He leaned back, his expression serious but kind. "I want you to promise me you'll think about something. Not right now. Not today, even. But soon." "Think about what?" "What you deserve," Ollie said simply. "Not what you think you can handle. Not what you've gotten used to. Not what someone else told you to accept. What you actually deserve." Sarah stared at him, the words settling into her chest like stones. She didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to respond. So she just stood up on shaky legs, nodded once, and walked back toward the counter. But Ali's words followed her with every step. "What you deserve." She'd forgotten she deserved anything at all. He ate slowly, sipped his tea, looked out the window at the gray afternoon like he had nowhere else to be in the entire world. But he was watching. The other customers had mostly stopped staring by now, going back to their own meals and conversations. But Frank, the manager, kept glancing over from behind the register, clearly thrilled to have someone famous in his establishment. Probably already planning how he'd tell this story for years to come. Ollie watched Sarah move through the diner. He noticed everything. The way she kept her shoulders hunched, making herself smaller. The way she checked the clock every few minutes, her anxiety visibly increasing as closing time approached. The way she flinched, actually flinched, when Frank raised his voice at her about a wrong order. "Sarah, I said no pickles on table 4. How hard is that?" "Sorry, Frank. I'll fix it." "You better. And hurry up, you've got other tables waiting." She'd nodded quickly, grabbed the plate, rushed back to the kitchen without defending herself or explaining that the mistake had been Joe's, not hers. Ali's jaw tightened. He'd seen this before. Growing up in Louisville, he'd watched his mother navigate his father's moods. He'd seen women in his neighborhood walk on eggshells in their own homes. He'd witnessed the quiet desperation of people trapped in situations they couldn't escape. And he'd sworn, even as a young man, that he'd never ignore it when he saw it happening. The elderly couple left, waving goodbye to Sarah as they shuffled toward the door. The trucker paid his bill and headed back to his rig. The old man with the newspaper folded it up and departed with a tip of his worn cap. The diner grew quieter. Sarah wiped down empty tables, her movements mechanical, practiced. She looked exhausted. Not just physically tired, soul-deep exhausted, the kind that comes from carrying weight no one else can see. Ali made his decision. He pulled out his wallet, but he didn't just count out money for the bill. He pulled out one of his business cards, plain white, just his name and a phone number. On the back, he began to write. His handwriting was careful, deliberate. He chose each word with the same precision he'd once used to plan his fights. When he finished, he folded the note carefully. Then he counted out a crisp $100 bill from his wallet and placed it on top. He stood up, left both items on the table, and walked toward the door. Sarah was at the register, counting out change for her apron pocket, when she noticed him leaving. "Sir." "Wait, your change." Ali turned back, that familiar warm smile crossing his face. "That's not change, Sarah. That's for you." He didn't wait for her response. Just pushed through the door, the bell chiming softly above his head, and disappeared into the gray afternoon. Sarah stared after him for a moment, confused. Then she walked over to table 7 to clear it. That's when she saw the $100 bill. Her hand flew to her mouth. $100. That was more than she made in a week. More than she'd ever received as a tip in her entire life. But then she noticed the paper underneath it. With trembling fingers, she picked up the folded note and opened it slowly. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. "Sarah, you are stronger than you know. And you deserve a life where you're not afraid. This is for you and Emma. Not for rent. Not for bills. For you. Call this number if you need help. Anytime. Day or night. You matter. Muhammad." Beneath his signature was a phone number, handwritten in the same careful script. Sarah's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the note. Tears streamed down her face. Hot, unstoppable tears that she couldn't control even though she was standing in the middle of the diner where anyone could see. She clutched the note to her chest like it was the most precious thing she'd ever held. Because it was. It wasn't just money. It wasn't just a kind gesture. It was proof that someone had seen her. Really seen her. Not just the smile she forced for customers or the competent waitress who never complained. Someone had seen her pain, her fear, her desperation. And instead of looking away like everyone else did, he'd reached out. "You okay, Sarah?" She turned to find Frank standing behind her, eyebrows raised. She wiped her face quickly, folding the note and tucking it deep into her apron pocket along with the $100 bill. "Yeah," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yeah, I'm okay." For the first time in months, she almost believed it. Because Muhammad Ali had given her something more valuable than money. He'd given her hope. And hope, she was beginning to remember, was a powerful thing. She couldn't. After her shift ended at 9, she picked up Emma from her neighbor's apartment. Mrs. Chen, a kind elderly woman who watched Emma for $5 a day, and held her daughter tight in the parking lot. "Mama, you're squishing me," Emma giggled. "Sorry, baby. I just missed you today." When they got back to their small apartment, Derek's truck wasn't in the driveway. He was probably at the bar. Again. Sarah put Emma to bed, read her a story, kissed her forehead, and waited until she heard the soft, steady breathing of sleep. Then she pulled out the note. She must have read it 20 times, sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, her fingers tracing Muhammad Ali's handwriting like she was afraid it might disappear. "Call this number if you need help. Anytime. Day or night." She looked at the clock. 11:47 p.m. Too late to call. Way too late. But then she heard Derek's truck rumbling up the street, and her whole body went rigid with fear. She knew that sound. The engine revving too loud. The tires screeching slightly as he took the turn too fast. He'd been drinking. The truck door slammed. Heavy footsteps on the walkway. Keys jangling. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. She grabbed the phone. Her hands shook as she dialed the number from the note. It rang once. Twice. 3 times. Maybe no one would answer. Maybe she'd made a mistake. Maybe. "Hello." A woman's voice. Professional but kind. I'm sorry," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. "It's so late, I shouldn't have." "It's okay," the woman said gently. "You're calling from Muhammad's number. Are you Sarah?" Sarah's breath caught. "How did you?" "He called earlier." Told us you might reach out. My name is Patricia. I work with a women's shelter here in Louisville. Are you safe right now? The front door opened. Derek stumbled inside, and Sarah could smell the whiskey from across the room. I have to go, Sarah whispered urgently. Wait, Sarah, listen to me. If you need help, we can come get you. Tonight. Right now. Just say the word. Derek's eyes found her in the dark kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. Who the hell are you talking to? He slurred. I'll call back, Sarah breathed into the phone and hung up. But something had shifted inside her. Maybe it was reading Ali's words over and over. Maybe it was hearing Patricia's voice offering help without judgment. Maybe it was just that she'd finally reached the breaking point every person has when they realize they can't keep living like this. Derek stumbled toward her. I asked you a question. Sarah stood up slowly. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to stay standing. A friend, she said quietly. You don't got friends, Derek sneered. You got work and you got me. That's it. No, Sarah said. The word hung in the air between them. Derek's expression darkened. What did you just say? Sarah's whole body was trembling, but she didn't back down. I said no. I'm done, Derek. We're done. He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You're not going anywhere. You got no money, no car, nowhere to go. You need me. I don't, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. I don't need this. And Emma doesn't need to grow up watching this. Derek's hand shot out and grabbed her arm, the same arm he'd bruised the night before. Sarah cried out in pain. But then, from the hallway, a small voice said, Don't hurt my mama. They both turned. Emma stood in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit, tears streaming down her face. Something broke in Sarah's chest. Her daughter had seen this, had heard this, was standing there terrified because her mother was too scared to leave. Not anymore. Sarah wrenched her arm free from Derek's grip. Get out, she said. This is my apartment. Get out. Sarah screamed, her voice echoing through the small space. Get out or I'm calling the police. Derek stared at her like he didn't recognize her. Maybe he didn't. Maybe Sarah didn't recognize herself either. Because for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't backing down. Derek must have seen something in her eyes. Something final, something broken free, because he stumbled backward toward the door. You'll come crawling back, he muttered. You always do. No, Sarah said firmly. I won't. He slammed the door behind him. And Sarah collapsed to the floor, pulled Emma into her arms, and sobbed. But these weren't tears of despair. They were tears of relief. Because she'd done it. She'd finally stood up. And she wasn't alone anymore. At 2:17 a.m., Sarah called Patricia back. By sunrise, she and Emma were safe in a women's shelter. And Muhammad Ali's promise, you matter, had become the truth she finally believed. Sarah and Emma stayed at the shelter, a quiet, secure building with warm meals, clean beds, and women who understood exactly what she'd been through because they'd lived it themselves. Patricia checked on them daily, helped Sarah file for a restraining order, connected her with a lawyer who worked pro bono for domestic violence survivors, made sure Emma had toys and books and other children to play with. And every few days, Patricia would tell Sarah, Muhammad called again. Wanted to make sure you're okay. Sarah couldn't believe it. A man that famous, that busy, checking on her. A waitress he'd met once. But he did. Because to Muhammad Ali, it wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about doing what was right. 2 weeks after that day in the diner, Sarah received a call. Ms. Mitchell? This is Lisa from the Muhammad Ali Foundation. Muhammad would like to meet with you and Emma, if you're comfortable with that. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Really? Really? He's been asking about you. Would this Saturday work? That Saturday, Sarah dressed Emma in her best outfit, a yellow dress with white flowers, and braided her hair carefully. They arrived at a small community center, nervous and excited. And then Muhammad Ali walked through the door. Emma's eyes went wide as saucers. Mama, she whispered loudly. That's him. That's the man from TV. Ali laughed, a warm, genuine sound, and knelt down to Emma's level, which wasn't easy for a man his size. "You must be Emma," he said softly. "Your mama told me all about you." Emma nodded shyly, clutching Sarah's hand. "You know what?" Ollie said, pulling something from his pocket, a small toy butterfly. "I brought this for you. You like butterflies." Emma's face lit up. "I love butterflies." "Me too," Ollie said with a wink. "Because they remind us that people can change. They can become something beautiful." He stood and looked at Sarah. His eyes were kind, proud even. "How are you doing?" he asked gently. Sarah's vision blurred with tears. I'm okay. Better than okay. I got the restraining order. I'm staying at the shelter. Emma's safe. We're safe." "That's good," Ollie said. "That's real good. And I'm proud of you, Sarah. What you did took more courage than anything I ever did in a boxing ring." Sarah shook her head. "I couldn't have done it without you." Ollie placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Yes, you could have. I just reminded you of who you already were. The strength was always there. You just needed to remember it." He reached into a bag he'd brought and pulled out an envelope. "This is for Emma's future," he said, handing it to Sarah. "College fund. Whatever she needs." Sarah opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a check for $10,000. She gasped, tears flowing freely now. "I can't. This is too much." "You can," Ollie said firmly. "And you will. Because every child deserves a chance to become whoever they want to be. And you deserve the chance to build the life you want. Without fear. Without someone telling you you're not good enough." Sarah pulled him into a hug, sobbing against his chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me. For not looking away." Ollie held her gently, like a father might hold a daughter. "You matter, Sarah," he said quietly. "Don't ever forget that." Sarah rebuilt her life, piece by piece. She enrolled in night school, earned her GED within a year, started training to become a nurse, because she wanted to help people the way she'd been helped. Emma thrived. Happy, safe, loved. And every year, on February 14th, the anniversary of that day in the diner, Sarah sent Muhammad Ali a letter, thanking him, updating him, reminding him that his kindness had saved 2 lives. Muhammad Ali passed away in 2016. But at his memorial service, Sarah was there. She stood with thousands of others who'd been touched by his generosity, his courage, his refusal to look away from injustice. And she whispered a promise to the man who'd changed everything. "I'll keep fighting. For me. For Emma. For every person who needs someone to notice. Because that's what strength really means. Not how hard you can hit, but how you lift others up when they can't stand on their own." If you believe silence should never protect abuse, type strength in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. More inspiring true stories are coming soon. Let us know which part moved you most. We read every comment and use your feedback to bring you better content. Thank you for watching. And remember, you have the power to change someone's life. Use it.